necessarily, but we do want that transparency and ownership. So the attribution, the intent is for each of the elements, the linked digital objects within, and Martina is going to introduce you to this vocabulary, each of the elements within that complex citation to actually receive the attribution. Which leads me to a whole new world of what does it mean to get attribution from a data citation. We're going to put that off to the side for our work. That's a challenge all by itself. So we're enabling that. Did I hit everything? Transparency, super. So now we're going to move on to a recap of those recommendations. And Martina Stockhause is going to join me up here to take us forward.
So I will walk you through the recommendations we came up with. So we had a working group which just finished their work at the start of the year before we then continued our work in the interest group, which is this session about. Okay. So the core of our recommendations is that we suggest that we have a new type of DOI. Why DOI? That came from the publisher world, so they need DOIs to integrate them into their citation infrastructure. The complex citation object, as Shelley has introduced, we don't want the credit to go to these objects, but to all the listed elements within, and we call these elements linked digital objects. So just to emphasize, it's a pure metadata object which just helps us to solve the problem that we have. But credit is really something, or the attribution should go to the linked digital objects because this is the scientific object. It can be data, software, IGSNs, so samples. What else wanted I to say here? I think this is pretty much the idea, what we suggest as solution. And we have defined a couple of requirements. I just look at this side here. We have 10 key requirements. We group them into these 5 bullet points. The first is around the aims that we have. So we want to solve the credit attribution for a large number of data sets stored across different repositories. Sometimes you use subsets. And on the other hand, we also want to enable the traceability. So in some cases, credit attribution and traceability are two things. If you think about that only subsets of the whole cited collection or group of data is used. So we need these both levels, or we want to have both levels to be supported, and that also comes from use cases like the IPCC. So credit attribution for the input data is important, but we also want to be transparent and show how the results were generated. So not only input data, but also which input data, which software. And this needs to be enabled also in a machine actionable way. The second bullet point is about that we need to be able to track every of these digital identifiers, so each linked digital object needs to be identifiable. We have not limited it to DOIs just to be support more use cases. The third bullet point is around maintenance of these CCOs. So we assign DOIs to the CCO, so that comes with some stability, it's persistent, it is resolvable, and we have to give guidance for versions, so that is the bullet point 3, recommendation 4 and 5. The next one is really the limit to one layer. I think Shelley also introduced that a little bit. So that came out of the early discussions. So something which we do not allow is that you have a complex citation object which cites a complex citation object. So that is limited to the one layer, just complex citation objects and a flat list of linked digital objects within, which should receive the credit in the end. This is a pragmatic approach, just to make it implementable for now. And the last point is about governance of these objects. So we recommend an open license. It's only metadata. There's no reason to close it. The information needs to be accessible, and we want to support a lot of different use cases. So the solution has to be flexible, but also simple to use. So we need to get down to a very small set of mandatory fields, but allow for the provision of more information to support the more advanced use cases. And with that, I hand over to the implementation and the storyline, the task groups we have at the moment.
Martina. So yes, you've just been hearing about the recommendations which came out of the Complex Citations Working Group, and we're now sort of in the implementation phase with the Complex Citations Implementation Interest Group, which is actually going to take place as part of the work of 3 task groups, which we're going to be hearing a little bit more in a short moment. So there's 3 task groups, just a quick overview. We have the implementation group, which is tackling the problems of, how do we actually implement complex citation objects? What are the expectations of the actors throughout the citation process as well to kind of handle those CCO objects? Then we have the technical task group, and what are the technical requirements for a complex citation object, and then also the adoption. How do we promote and encourage the adoption of these CCOs? But before we kind of get on to listening to what those groups have been doing, just a little bit of a timeline about how the idea of the complex citation has sort of been evolving with us. So this all started back in an AGU meeting. I think it was sometime in December 2020. It was a full meeting, and there was really sort of the identification that this really was a sort of a concern, that we were breaking away from being able to link through to data sets and other objects and making sure that credit was being passed through. So from that, in P19, so the RDA plenary, we had the Complex Citations Birds of a Feather session, where we sort of gathered the community together. We sort of really sort of talked about what we could possibly do, and then from that, the Complex Citations Working Group was formed in 2022. And as you've already heard, we had the recommendations document, which was produced from that and endorsed by RDA. On the back of that, which came out in January this year, I think it was, and as you can find that on Zenodo. There's a link on the slides, which should also be in the collaborative notes for the meeting as well. So on the back of that, we were sort of endorsed as a Complex Citations Implementation Interest Group earlier this year, and we've been sort of working through our statement of works. So month 3, we sort of established the actual task groups, the technical task group and the implementation task group, and those have been sort of working on a regular basis, meeting on the Mondays. And we're now sort of into month 6, where we're sort of starting to share some of the first findings of those groups, and obviously sharing here at the plenary. We'll be continuing on that work. So month 9, we'll be sort of producing the first formation of the not the implementation task group, the adoption task group. I think it's the one that's coming next. And then, we'll be continuing the work on from there as well. Okay, over to James to introduce the work of the implementation task group.
So, implementation task group is one of the 2 that we've already set up. We targeted developing guidance for creating a complex citation object, so for all the workflow actors, and how citing in the scholarly publication. Develop an approach for scholarly publication to support in-text citation of a linked digital object, and provide guidance on citation elements, so how everyone is actually going to be implementing this. We started by looking at the potential workflow, so from the generator of data or generator of data products or amalgamation of data, and working through the process. So what do you expect it to do when you start your research, start collecting the information and knowing what you're going to be using, potentially publishing the data, and then also the actual citation of that object within the literature publication, and where credit actually aligns. So we're actually looking at who the actors are, the workflow actors, and how they potentially interact with the complex citation object and their roles around that. And we're slowly actually digging into unknown unknowns and all that sort of stuff as we're evolving and trying to see how you actually get credit through the process. So effectively, we identify the process to inform the guidance, identify the roles and responsibilities, and identify any tools. So if you are collecting all these data, how can you pull it together and actually have a service? How can an editor actually review the data more easily? And we've started drafting some text. It's still a work in progress, but we're getting through some of the different processes. We do have some challenges. So we started looking at the inline citation and implementing the inline citation. One thing that we don't want is attribution to be given to people who create the complex citation object, and more to the people who did the data that underpins. So how that looks in terms of citation and inline citation, and how that sort of works within, if you have one DOI, one bit of data versus thousands, and sort of engaging with the publishers and the indexes and starting to work with those workflow actors to see, are we getting it right? What do we need to understand and work through? And then we have, we're continuing with providing guidance and citation elements. So again, further engagement and actually getting the text out there and draft and getting that confirmation from those workflow actors. Going forward, we've got a bit more work to do with engagement, publishers, indexes, data sites, the reference collators, and actually formalize and consolidate some of the guidance we actually have. We've got some text for different workflow actors, and also ensure that we're working with the technical task group and bringing in anything that they're developing in terms of the technical solutions to that problem. So now I hand over to Martina.
We asked for questions about what you presented.
Yeah, we can take some questions if anyone has on the implementation so far. I think we have a question in the room.
There's a mic. Can you hear me?
Oh, it's not.
Hello. Eric Laurie from the Australian Institute of Marine Science. I was just wondering if you could talk more about examples where complex citation objects apply and where they don't apply. For example, I was thinking, it's a big collection of DOIs. Yes, you were talking about mixing software and other things together. And I'm thinking, it's kind of like an ingredients list for some food without the recipe, but you've only now got one reference, so you can't say how the parts are connected. And I was thinking, okay, so when's that going to be relevant? And then I was thinking, well, maybe in some cases where you've got a whole heap of DOIs of parts of a system and you're creating a subset, then that kind of makes sense where all the DOIs are strongly related to each other and there's no need to talk about this complex relationship. So I was wondering if you could allude to examples where they apply and where they don't.
Yes, there's a few examples. So for instance, if you just have one DOI, you've got one data set, you've just got one DOI and you're just presenting the results, you might as well just cite the DOI directly and not have a complex citation object. So that's a very simple case. A big case is you have lots of DOIs, and journals typically will not allow more than, I'm going to pluck a figure, I'm sorry, 30. And therefore you need to actually create this because it actually underpins it. Now the technical task group are looking at how you actually unpick that. And in the use cases we had in our recommendations, so I work at the British Oceanographic Data Centre and we have granules underneath the DOIs. Potentially you could unpick which granules you used from a super DOI or a collection. And it's not just DOIs, we've ensured that the complex citation should be brittle. So you could have URLs We accept that that is a case where people do still want to cite that they've got data from a URL, for instance, and that is reasonable. So we do have URLs, but it's PIDs in general, it's not just DOIs. So how that gets unpicked is sort of being worked under the task group.
This is not a question, more like a suggestion, because we're talking about complex citation object gives the impression that it's complex. So you want to be more inviting, and the one idea that came up is how about collective citation object? You don't have to change the acronym, and it is actually what it is a collection of PIDs. So before we go farther down the road, maybe it's time to change the name of this.
Agree. We do agree that that has been raised, and we are aware that it's a complex problem, but it's a simple solution. And I think mentioning complex at the start maybe scares people off beforehand. So yeah, we do take that on board.
So
Thank you.
Collective. Instead of complex. Thank you.
Okay, Kira McNeese.
Hi, Kira McNeese, Cambridge University Press. I was just going to say in response to your question, I've seen two practical examples that have come up with our journals recently. One was a case where we had a manuscript submission from someone who'd done a meta-analysis of several hundred papers, and they'd cited all of them, but not all of them were actually used as like references in the text. So they had sort of their standard reference list where all the things were actually referenced, and then they had like an extended reference list with literally hundreds. And so this paper was like 80 pages long, and 80% of it was a list of extra references. So yeah, this would be, to me, would seem like the sort of solution. This would be the sort of solution that could address that sort of problem, where you want to actually cite all the things you've addressed in your meta-analysis, but you're not actually sort of citing actual excerpts of those papers. They've just been part of a longer analysis. And we've got another case where one of our journals wants to encourage all of the researchers and authors who submit to the journal to cite every bit of research software that they might use, which again would lead to potentially hundreds of references. And so being able to do that without ending up with 90% of the manuscript being a reference list would be really helpful. Yeah, so those are two cases I've seen recently, and I'm really excited to hopefully see this work progress to be able to deal with those sorts of situations. Yeah.
I'm going to say, just in the interest of time as well, just make sure to let Martina, but if you have any questions at the end, then we can have time, and then we can take some more.
So this is the second of the 3 task groups that we, 2 we have established, and 1 will be started soon. So the technical task group is focusing on the complex citation objects themselves. So how to standardize them, and then going from standardization, so discussion of metadata schemas, forward towards the pilot implementation. And of course we have an exchange to the implementation task team, because that is, we need to provide or define a standard which is really usable and can be taken up by the different actors that we need to get on board here. So we have done what I called here guiding principles. Maybe it's initial decisions that we have made. So we think that DataCite DOIs are the best place to publish our complex citation objects, because we think that repositories will do it, so that's the natural partner that we have. So we will include discussions with DataCite a bit more than in the past, or again, because at the start we did it in the working group, but we lost a bit the contact. We need to improve that. So the metadata, I have said it in the introduction. So we want to have something easy to use. So if I think about our proof of concept for the IPCC, the real challenge was to gather the information and make it easy for the scientists to provide it. And on the other hand, we have some really advanced groups which have lots of provenance information, so we want to enable them that they can provide this traceability information in addition, but the primary focus should be the credit attribution. So that is our starting point, but allowing for more information to be provided. So the three tasks, we started with the specification, so a lot of metadata discussion, but we are a small group, so in the next step we will reach out to you. So just to announce what we will announce in the end. So we are planning a hackathon, and this is maybe not the final metadata that we have, but just to make sure that the use cases that several of you have provided are covered by the recommendation or suggestions that we have. And this is the general concept that we have. So data side is what we said at the beginning. We have a flat structure to enable the uptake by the different actors. And flat means that we just have all these linked digital objects. I have just put it in, so there might be data objects which need to be credited. There might be some code or software, samples or other data, but there might be also some references for the CCO itself. So there might be a paper where all the data in the CCO was used. So there might be additional parts which should not receive the credit, but it makes sense to reference them. So I would say we have linked digital objects and ordinary references. Or we can't really limit the usage to only linked digital objects, so we must be aware that these could be there. Again, the reason was really to make it as pragmatic and that it can be taken up in a short amount of time. That's the limit of the one layer. The one thing we propose is here that we change the usage of, or that we need a different interpretation of DOI metadata. So we want the credit not to go to those authors, and that's really what the other task group is doing. We need this take-up and the change of interpretation for these objects. What we have done is to think about what would we need from data side to identify this as a complex citation object. So we have another resource type general, and we need to identify as I have introduced that which of the related identifiers are linked digital objects and which are really ordinary relations. So in the end, we are misusing, I would say, the metadata schema of DataCite, what we are proposing, but the benefit is that the changes are small to this metadata schema. And this is what we want to support. So in the complex citation metadata, we want to support more detail. So there might be linked digital objects which in itself have a subset or are otherwise composed out of data sets. So this is the secondary layer somehow which we need to separate from the DataCite metadata. And this is mostly the discussion what we have at the moment. How do we standardize it in a flexible way? Yeah, and we identified that schema.org is still the best known and the best way to describe this metadata and to publish it as part of the HTML web page. So we discussed the different approaches, but thought that schema.org JSON LD seems to be known by most of the different groups we talk to. And this is really the state where we are at the moment. So we had a lot of discussions, and there are two approaches. We can use the DataCite recommendations, how schema.org should be used, and then just provide more detail where it is necessary. So the easy thing is, if you think of a repository, they already have the schema.org implementation, and they can just extended, put an additional layer into it. What is speaking against it is that we are, in a way, misusing the data side metadata, and we do it with schema.org again, because these are not relations, these are linked digital objects. And that's why we have a second discussion, which is brought in by Jonathan, a very active member of our both task groups, who brought in the OAI ORE concept. And this is coming more from the knowledge graph side, and it's easier to use from that perspective of provenance and traceability, but it is an increased effort for repositories because it's a different metadata schema approach that we have. And this is more or less where we are discussing which way to go, and that's also where I think we need most of the input, because we are a small group, and I think we have a lot of repositories here and other actors in the workflow which can give us some opinions and help us to define which way to go in the end. So I think the hackathon will very likely provide these two directions, and then in a practical exercise to use our use cases to describe them with these two approaches can give us the idea in which way we have to go. So that's the current idea, that we have to finalize this. I think that's what I have one more slide. So we are working on this metadata draft. We are planning this hackathon maybe in November, end of November, and then hopefully finalize the first version of the metadata to have something for the other task group to discuss. Uwe. Uwe always has questions.
Yeah, it's not. It's on. Oh, it's on. Yeah, it's not a question. So actually looks fine. So in general, I would think in any case you should have both, like schema.org and the other one, included in the landing pages. Schema.org is a must, and I think schema.org doesn't have the problem like DataCite, because inside the citations you can have other citations. We use that on our side too, so you can hierarchically include them, though that's perfectly fine. But I would strongly agree, especially for those Googles and other search engines, to have that as schema.org. So that's definitely a must, but it's also not really complicated, because it's more or less just a simple way. So I would change that and say it must be in the landing page of the complex citation object. That should be defined from the beginning. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Uwe. So just to emphasize that for the DataCite approach, we thought of the JSON LD representation. So also this schema.org representation, and it was a matter of how to define the metadata, closer to the ORI or closer to the DataCite recommendations, how to map it. Matt has a question?
Yeah, thanks. I agree, this all looks good. I think my question is more about bigger picture, and maybe this is as much for Matt Byes over here from DataCite as for you, but how does this effort connect into the RAID work, where I know RAID is supposed to be for project activities or projects, but the base model is almost identical in that it's a thing that points to a list of identifiers, and it's being implemented through DataCite. So I guess I'm curious how these two connect and how they're different.
Is this a question to Matt or to us? I see that Matt raised his hand, so maybe Matt can do the start of that.
Yeah, I can make a comment and others can add. Matt from DataCite. I don't necessarily have, I think we need to see how these are implemented and understand, but what I will say is RAID incorporates more than just research outputs and resources. It's also looking at the funding, the facilities, the affiliations, the contributors, whereas this is more focused around the specific outputs or resources that are being cited as part of the work. So it's it's different in that sense, and this can feed into a RAID. And I think we can also, just making a comment that if we look at a PID graph, it depends on the view that you want to look at this from. Like a DMP ID can also show you a number of different activities and resources related, as well as a award ID. You can also do the same. So it's really the view and the context that the community is looking at this from. And this has a very specific workflow and use case within publication workflows. There are some things that we need to address downstream, and aggregation and credit to the different contributors through the different layers, but those are things that are always possible, and it's adaptation to some of the technical infrastructure, but it's not too complex to get there. So yeah, also not calling it complex, maybe +1 to that, but
What I would just add to that, and I love that you asked the question, is it's very, if you think about like time series, RAID is the entire time series of the effort, no matter how many grants, no matter how many people, and this is a moment in time for that research output. And it's, so maybe we'll have to come up with a slide that kind of shows that.
Yeah, while you're walking, so technically I would say there are similarities. So we have a bundle of different references, but the aim and the use case is a bit different. So RAID is more looking at the project which evolves, and this is the reuse of data, more or less, which we want to describe in a bit more detail, getting the traceability in, but also ensure that we get a higher number of, or increase the number of data citations with a simple approach, which is often, hopefully, taken up by the different actors.
Hello, I've got a question about the landing page associated with these DOIs. I could imagine logging into DataCite and, creating a collection using this process when it's implemented, but obviously every DOI has to point to a landing page somewhere, and what would that be? Who would host that? Would each system have their own implementation that allows people to create it? I don't know, how does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the CCOs, as every other DOI, need a landing page. But we don't need a domain repository. So it would be, or my plan is to reach out to some of the generalist repositories. If they can enable an easy way to add all these different linked digital objects into the metadata, I think that would make a difference for the uptake.
Presumably that's where the JSON LD would be? I was trying to work out the connection between the two.
Good question. So the one side is what we can publish with DataCite. So we are a bit limited to this one layer and the static references without having any information how they are related to each other. And if we use a JSON LD representation, we can use some of the parts which we have to provide additional detail in the metadata. So it should be an extension without breaking the metadata that we have. And that's also the challenge if we go too far from DataCite metadata, that the mapping gets a bit more difficult. So bringing it down to the DataCite part of the metadata, or to the one-layer metadata, which excludes the additional detail. Uwe is...
No, we have one right here. Hang on, Uwe.
Thank you. Chantal Ridsdale from Ocean Networks Canada. I'm sure many of you, like me, have had many conversations with people. Where does RDM sit with the AI work that's happening? And when I read this paper, the recommendations, that kind of came out as a use case potentially, because AI is just so much a black box. And I was speaking to somebody who's leading an AI effort, and I suggested this type of thing to him, and he seemed really keen on it. And I was wondering if you had any interest shown by that community, or if you have any contacts, because I'd be happy to make that connection.
I think it sounds interesting, especially if we have the long list of linked digital objects, to have some support by AI tools which make it easier. I'm not the AI expert, but it's especially very valuable to reach out to them and see how they can support us in a practical way. So I think it's good to have the connection.
Yeah, I'm also coming back to the question before. So actually, in my opinion, you should focus on the metadata schema that best fits to those CCOs, and then just map it when you're registering the DOI at data site. That's basically how most repositories should also work like. So especially the domain repository, they are just everything that can be mapped gets to data site. And the schema.org is also internally. So in my opinion, and we are also thinking about that, maybe it would be good to have something like one provider or only a few providers offering those complex citations, which have a user interface for the end users, which works like Zenodo, but very specialized for complex citations. And the other one is that there should also be maybe an API available, because then you, of course, an API, because there could also be the other possibility that you have, for example, imported all your data sets that you have used or something like into EndNote or any other reference manager, that you can click on a link for all those references you have collected to create a complex citation object out of it, which would also help the users to do it on their own computer. And if there are too many repositories, you have too many APIs, so maybe there would be the best idea to have somebody who is implementing that. That's just an idea, but you have to find one. So, yeah.
I don't think we have to find one.
I know.
I think you just volunteered. Right? Yeah.
But
so
just to mention, I tend to agree that it would be good not to have too many, because then you have a couple of repositories which are well known in the community, and we know some level of quality that they agree on. It's much easier to govern them if there are not too many.
But we don't need a quality control operation.
You need, like everyone else, an independent quality control. Yeah, but that's a different question.
Yeah, it's interesting that we sort of started by saying these aren't complex, these are simple. But then as soon as you get down to implementing it, what I thought was going to be simple, I've got questions firing in all sorts of different directions. And I don't know if these are going to be questions, observations, or just getting stuff out of my head so I don't dwell on it too much. I think you made a comment about these may not need repositories, or don't need repositories, but I'm thinking...
Domain repositories was my remark, because it's no specific knowledge on the domain necessary to curate these objects.
Okay, that makes sense, because I'm thinking of a context where someone uses a piece of software, outputs a file, inside that file are contributions from various data sets. I could create a citation object around it. I've got to store that file somewhere for it to be citable as a CCO. But as you say, I don't need a domain repository for that. I could put it in a generalist repository or choose to use our own. So yeah, that was one helpful clarification. I think the other thing, just looking at your metadata recommendations, I think you're saying you don't need new relation types. And I'm wondering why you don't need a relation type, because isn't there a special relationship between a CCO and an LDO?
Or you can come up here and just join me here, because it goes across both of the task groups.
Yeah, so my understanding is that you could use, is version of, has part, is part, and there are existing relations that already cover a lot of those contents. So if there is one that's needed, then yeah, we would need, but from what we've gathered, we don't believe there is that need, apart from this, it's a CCO, not a DOI. It's the type of DOI, yeah.
So the actual implementation stroke recommendations are likely to be that if you have a CCO, then this is the relation type that you should use to link that, rather than just saying choose your own. You're going to sort of make sure you recommend a specific.
It depends on the flavour of the data. Yeah, it depends on the flavour of the relationship. So I think that understanding what that relationship is important.
Yeah.
But also it's where that citation and that credit lies as well.
Okay. Yeah, because it's in my
head. May I add to that? Yeah. So the recommendation or the suggestion to data side was that we don't need additional relation types because we have so many already in data side, because, well, yeah, we don't need to come up with something else, and it might give a bit more detail on what kind of relation these LDO has within the CCO.
Yeah, and
so at the moment the discussion is not to use one specific relation type from in this flat data side metadata, but to allow to choose from what's there. But it's in discussion, so we have not finalized the discussion. It's just we don't want to suggest another one.
Understood that. But in my head, though, I think there should only be one recommended type, because I worry this would get more complex if you allow too much nuance in what is rather a systematic solution to packaging a bunch of things together in a systematic way.
I think it's also related to our decision if we want to go for a metadata description for the CCO, which starts with what we need, like Uwe said, and then we will possibly end up to recommend how to map it to data side. If we start the other way around, we might allow more. So I tend to go to the direction we should focus on what we need to describe in a good way in schema.org, and then do the mapping, and if we only have a few repositories doing that, then we have some specialists, and hopefully a unique way to map that, and not 3 or 4
I think you can
different
also
ways.
Start. So basically the list of relation types in data are changing all the time. So many of those relation types, for example, in the Pangea case we had already before. So actually whenever a new metadata version comes out, there's a new relation type, we have to map that in a better way, and then it's just an update of all our DOIs to update the relation type in data side. And because of that, I said it would be the best to really focus on your own metadata schema just for complex relation types, and then think of how to map it to the actual landscape that's out there, because that's easier to maintain. Because if you focus on what you really want to have, the mapping is easier. If you have something that does not really fit well, then or goes into different directions, so it might be if you want to transfer from data side to schema.org, you lose information or the other way, but if you have something which is natively to that type of object, it's easy to map to that representation or that representation. That's, I think, something that might be the best approach here, because nothing fits correctly at the moment.
Short question back. You have your own metadata schema that you use internally.
Exactly.
And if you have to map to the CCO metadata schema and to data side, how much effort is it? If you support 2 new ways of,
Yeah, actually from the point of view of the data center, we don't really need to do that because we don't create CCOs yet. So, but generally,
hypothetical question.
No. In general, we if there's from the point of view, if we are not thinking about CCOs, about other metadata formats like a new version of ISO 19139,
at the moment
we just
limit
add a new
it to
mapping
CCO.
for that. Exactly. We just. I think you have more flexibility. That's what I say. The work is, I think, it's not so many properties in the metadata schema. Yeah.
Not many mandatory ones.
Yeah.
I think ideally you would be able to create your own schema in, say, JSON LD. You can have all the detail you like, do your mapping across, but you still need data site to change something so that you get the appropriate changes in behavior for credit assignment. So there's still, it's not like you can just work in isolation and then just do a remapping. There's still got to be some connection.
Yeah, thanks. And we are aware we can't work in isolation. So it needs a lot of actors to really make this happen and to make this new way of citing data a reality. So with DataCite, of course, we need to be in contact that this is not breaking any workflows of users of the metadata, for instance, and that it fits into their procedures.
I have a question. Eric and I were talking a couple days ago, and he asked me a question, which he hasn't actually asked here, so I'm going to ask it. If credit, so credit is a construct. Credit takes place when somebody values that this data, this digital object was used. And so setting aside who's valuing that, and we talk about attribution instead, so you enable credit through attribution. If we have, and this may, so if the research has an aggregated data set, so a data set that was created from other pieces of other data sets, how would that, and we wanted to make sure those pieces were credited, how would you recommend, what would we include in the CCO for that paper? How would that work physically? Like, not physically, but digitally. How would that work digitally? Would you include the aggregated data set only and then make sure you cited in the aggregated data set each of the data sets that were used, or both? You do that and the data sets that were used. Ha-ha.
So, in my view, if we want to assign or attribute credit, we need to get it into the DataCite metadata, even if these are on different layers. And we need the schema.org definition to make clear how they are related.
So I can see
that would be my view, but we need it in the system, and that means we need to get it into the DataCite metadata if it should be introduced in the credit world.
And I would add with that example as well, that's where publisher guidance is key as well, because you're aggregating, you have 10 data sets. Can you just cite it in the actual publication direct, or do you build something out?
All right.
This gets a little bit messy, I think, because if you take that same example onto a journal publication, then you have all of the, David Lisinski, Geoscience Australia, sorry. Then you have that same situation where a journal article is an aggregation of all sorts of other people's work, and the crediting is in DataCite, but it's at that other level. If we have something like an aggregated data set, and we generate lots of national scale aggregated data sets, as long as that aggregated data set has its own identity, which includes all the sources, that would be the same. So then the requirement there would be that the journal publishers would say, if you have an aggregated data set, it needs to be published and have a DOI that defines all of the references associated with
So you're arguing for keep it clean, keep okay. That makes sense to me, but.
Because aggregation in itself is a lot of work quite often, and you deserve the credit for that aggregation. Sorry, aggregation, creating aggregated, curated data sets is a lot of work itself, and you mentioned earlier about the collections, you know, deserve credit. That is why you would do it this other way.
And then your description of that could explain how it was aggregated, the workflow, maybe there's some software involved. Okay.
I don't know if this gathering is always getting credit. So for the proof of concept, I did the work of gathering all the information for the IPCC use case, and the credit goes to the IPCC Data Distribution Center. But that was my decision, because at the moment, of course, we don't have complex citation. It's a proof of concept where we use Zenodo, and we discussed it. Who should be the author of that? Because at the moment it gets a lot of visibility, and we thought it's a community effort. It starts with the authors, and the maintenance is by the data distribution centers, and I'm just the contact person because I did the gathering and the mapping in the end.
I think for the I think there may be also cases where the complex citation object needs to get its own credit because it was very much so. The question here is if you could also take the whole concept you're having there and just replace the resource type instead of complex citation object, make it a collection, and then for publishers, in that case, because it's basically both is the same, so you can also create a collection. If you mark it as collection, then it's really citable object. But then the important thing is it would also be good if those citation counter organizations also look into the targets, not only for the complex citation objects. It would also be good if they going deeper into normal collections. So they have a credit on the collection itself, but also all those childs. So I think that's also required because it's a child of that collection, but also the collection which has its credit, because it's two different works, I think.
Yeah. So here's where we're going to put a scope boundary. We're not going to figure out in this particular work how credit will work, but I think we should spin off a different working group for that because it's time. It's time to actually get that figured out. We had one more? Or do we have enough time?
One more, and afterwards I just think we should move on.
A lot of thoughts going through my head right now. First question is this year going to have any actual files, or is it going to be just a list of links?
It's literally going to be signposts, and that has double impact in the sense that you're not actually taking data, so you don't have to overly worry about ownership of the data and licensing, because that's inherently kept with the data. So it can be as open as possible, so pretty much very open, and it's just signposting, it's just metadata to where it is.
The reason I'm asking, because I'm a curator for institutional data repository, and you mentioned this has to be done in a repository, so I'm just thinking about practical aspect of how this can be done. So our institutional data repository is based on Mendeley data, so you're going to have a contributor and the description, and then they have related links. I think that's where it's going to go, but in the current structure, there's no way we can fit all that, because they only give you 3 options as related link, like is it publication, or is it related data set, or software. But we're going to have a lot of different categories, so they will have to modify that part. And then this one is just metadata only, and the links. There's no physical files. Because repository, normally we deposit data. So we get a lot of requests from publisher, oh, we can't send you a manuscript for review unless you make sure your data is deposited in a data repository, give us a DOI. So we do that a lot, and then they won't even publish until, once they get accepted, they actually demand this DOI to be live, published, before they get. So it's changing. So, this will go to data availability statement, and I don't think we are clear on that where we're going to put CCO. It's going to be data availability statement or somewhere else, a reference.
I'll lean to Shelley on that.
So we are working through all of that right now in the working groups, but at the moment, the thinking is you would describe in the availability statement any digital object that you use within your paper. So you would say, you know, the content, all the digital objects used for this are in this complex citation object, which we will rename by the time we do this. If you want to send in your nominated names, please do so. And then we haven't worked out through exactly what those author guidelines are going to be. So we'll get there.
More like a metadata only. It's going to be metadata only record.
It's metadata only.
Any, files.
Yeah, that's right. You're not moving files.
Can I just very quickly?
Ooh.
I'll try and join the group to contribute to the discussions going forward, but I can see scenarios where you might want to have a CCO that resolves to a place where you download a file which contains the data.
I think that pertains to the landing page. You have a DOI, so you have a landing page. So it's metadata, but fundamentally that is data. So one person's metadata is another person's data, isn't it? Yeah.
And of course, we have a maintenance or a governance complication. So we expect we expect that all the linked digital objects are stored in a repository, that they are already taken care of, and we just link to it.
But I might have another file that I want to associate.
Yeah.
You join the
Join the working group. I can't grab the use case at the moment, so we think it's taken care of by a repository, these linked digital objects, and we just reference to them and say this is part of the linked digital of the complex citation.
Yeah, the list of citations could be, for example, downloaded from the landing page. The other thing that also came into my mind, I think you're missing that with the metadata and access to those. I think if you have that landing pages, it should also implement the signposting standard, fair signposting in that case, and list all the childs as items there, because that's actually what they are. And then it's really accessible, and that would also solve the problem if somebody wants to download all those additional. Yeah.
So that leads us right into adoption. So I'm really delighted to hear that Pangea has just signed up to actually, are we not thrilled? Are we not thrilled? Yay, Pangea!
Have you had one more slide, Martina?
One more slide. I talked to it.
All right, she's done that, okay.
Thank you all. You're digging in, you're understanding, you've added, I wrote down 2 use cases we didn't have before, AI from Chantel, and we actually Kira, we were leaving out actually citing journal articles in here, so we're gonna have to have like a deep think on, does that make sense? And it sounds like you've got a use case where that might make sense. I was really nervous when you said that. I'm like, ooh, I was thinking digital objects, not journal, but somebody's metadata is another person's data. So, you know, we can probably think that through if it's more useful for journals. So really exciting. So adoption means we find people like Pangea, like Uwe, who are incredibly enthusiastic about this, can see the value of it, and would like to give it a go in order for us to run a first event, our first run through. So the hackathon that Martina was talking about is leading into doing that to make sure we've got everything considered. And you can hear how this, what it means to actually enable attribution, enable credit, then leads into how we all think about this. So it would be a really fantastic topic here at RDA to actually bring that in. What does it mean to actually give credit to a digital object? And I know Matt Marinick has left, but for those of you who are monitoring the work around persistent identifiers for instruments, for facilities, in order for there to be a linkage between the contributions they're making into research so that the next Nobel the next Nobel Prize for, say, physics or something. Oh, God, what am I? I'm so sorry. I'm I'm not even getting, so when people watch this in 100 years, they're not going to know why that was funny. Cringe. So the next Nobel Prize winner is going to actually be able to identify every single contribution from every person, from every data, from every software for that work. And I think that will be absolutely amazing, because I personally believe research is a team sport and not one individual's contribution. So I see there being a really important evolution when we enable the ability to identify what went into this outcome, what went into this research, what went into this visualization, what went into this important decision-making that we're doing. So adoption is, the task group is lagging behind technical and implementation for the reasons that we have to wait till we figure out what we're actually going to be implementing. And then the hackathon is actually stepping into participating in that. And would you like to actually be part of that first group to try to make this happen? I hope so. I hope you just want to stay involved to see how this goes with popcorn or whatever. There are enough people. We don't have in this slide deck the research ecosystem workflow actors, but they are thick. There's so many, and everybody has their own point of view and their own way of being acknowledged and what their needs are. And you can imagine them all in your mind. There are dozens and dozens of different groups, and think about that internationally. And so adoption will step into that space. So Uwe, can I really count on you to help out from Pangea? Okay. Let's make it really happen. I know I'm teasing you, but I really would love it if you could. And I know Kira's very interested, coming from her work. She publishes the IPCC report, and so there's a real need for that particular important thing for all of us worldwide in order to be well documented, and so that the steps are being taken for that. I think AGU will implement. It's not a done deal. We live in the United States and money's a real problem right now, but I think we will start to contribute to that, but it would be great if there were others. So that's what we'll do. We'll start to communicate, we'll start to build training materials, get feedback, find folks that will work through each of those pieces, and then awareness, and you're gonna see this come back at RDA, you're gonna see this come back at different associations, publishing associations and indexers, and all of the folks that are behind the scenes for that workflow. And then repositories. If you read the recommendation, we call it a CCO generator. And it helps that you are a member of DataCite, because you're going to generate a DOI. And then what does that funding mean? What is the cost of doing that and such? So we will work through all of that. And I think it does make sense. And I knew we would have to do this eventually. The question was when, what does credit mean? And that's a different group of people, right? That's a different group of people. And I think it might be time to spin that one up. So if you're interested in that, do let me know. My email is my initial of my first name, Shelley, so an S, and my last name, Stall, S-T-A-L-L, so S-S-T-A-L-L @agu.org. And I'm happy to try to pull you in for the idea of credit. If you just want to do popcorn, just watch RDA you can watch the popcorn. But if you want to help, definitely send me an email. Alrighty, time. Oh, we're still pretty good. Yep, so next steps, it reiterated what we had on the first slide. Does anyone have questions on adoption? Hip, 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 hip. Now, when can you stop? Whatever the plan said. Or whatever. Yeah, when do we start? Probably soon. I think, is it November? Month 9? We're on 6 now, so yeah. Month 9, 6, so January. Please say January, because it's a little busy between now.
I'm going to dig in a little more about getting this published through repository. So most of the repositories connect to the data site and they mint DOI. And assuming this CCO is going to be customized DOI with its own name.
Type,
and,
yeah, new type.
Yeah, new type. So is it possible to, when they issue a DOI, would it come with the name CCO, for example? How would that?
That's a super question. So I'm not going to answer it directly, but I will tell you about a conversation that we had with the folks that work on JATS. So JATS is the XML format that most publishers use to render a paper. And what it's, so we talked to the folks that push forward the reuse pieces of that. Those are the ones that focus on data citation, software citation, the availability statement. So we just had the conversation a couple weeks ago, and my colleagues were there, and the question was, how do we, hang on, I just lost the bubble. I'm sorry. What? Inline citation text, yeah. Thanks. So sorry. What time zone is it? When you, CCO, right. So when you cite, okay, walk through you're writing your paper, you've generated your complex citation object. Are you gonna help me out? Yeah, okay. You generated your complex citation object. You put it in the reference section. You wrote all the right stuff for the availability statement, whatever we decide is the right way to do that. Oh, thanks. Then, when you're writing your paper and you want to cite something inside the complex citation, which will have a new name and it won't be scary, we'll want you to be able to identify which of the linked digital objects, and note, we realize how close that is to linked data object, right? Like it's not the same thing. So that's another vocabulary. So linked digital object, that we don't want the author list necessarily to be, you know how we say like Stahl et al. Well, that sounded funny. Stahl et al., comma, 2025. We don't want that. We want it to be more agnostic. It's more like, because this is not credit about me, it's credit for the object itself. So you can see where we have in-text citation CC01, which is also confusing because are you going to type an O or a 0? So we'll get that figured out also because you just know no one's going to type it right. That you could actually have, we want you to just have one complex citation in the paper, but we can envision that people might actually generate 1, 2, or 3 or whatever. So complex citation 1, comma, linked digital objects 30 through 90, and that the text that went with that is referencing those 60 elements within the complex citation object. Right. So that's what we're envisioning right now.
But I don't think this is going to be doable with the existing repository. The reason why is because just think about all the customized DOIs, like a RAID or DMPID or IGSN. They have their own platform. So you almost need a registry to mint CCO is a customized DOI.
Absolutely,
so, right.
Absolutely. We're calling it a CCO generator, that you will generate a complex citation object, and you will select from all of the, if I want to pick an IGSN, I will use the DOI for the IGSN to add in the metadata into the CCO. So it's essentially, okay, don't hold on to your table. It's a reference manager.
So
it's a reference manager.
It kind of works as a registry.
Yeah, I could imagine Zotero actually stepping in to do this, but then they would have to generate DOIs, right? Like, so if you imagine a Zotero collecting all of the things you use for your research, it's that idea, and then
assign a DOI.
Yep, and so imagine you used Zotero to create it. You output a BibTeX file, which is correct. By the way, Zotero does not do data citations correctly. So first we have to fix that. Let's fix the data citations, so whoever else they're messing up, and get the complex citation object right. They output a BibTeX file. You input it into a CCO generator at a repository. It populates the noise. You get the noise too, and then boom, you register that metadata for a CCO with DataCite. DataCite's flags go off, yay, we have our first CCO. And then we celebrate, and we did the first thing, we cite it, and then we pray everything else happens later. So, okay, not prayer, but we're gonna fix it. But yeah, absolutely. It's a legit thing that will have persistence. And yeah.
Yeah, like with the IGSNs, theoretically you could also, because when you have an IGSN, you sometimes show in front of the DOI instead of a DOI an IGSN logo. You could also, if you have a cool logo for that, it could also, then it would be even more obvious on web pages that this is a complex citation object. That could also be an idea.
Pangea is doing this.
Yeah.
I'm totally having Uwe design this. Honest to God, I'm loving everything he's saying. We're going to get a logo. It won't be complex. It will be easy, and we're going to love this. Okay, we're coming. Anybody else? We have a few more minutes for questions. Oh, yes.
Hi, I'm Faye from the University of Queensland Library. I'm a data librarian as well.
Yay!
So I'm thinking about, again, practical side of the things.
Yeah.
So there is a tree, a decision-making tree, and there is a question, do I need a CCO or not?
Right.
So who's
Right.
making this decision?
Mm.
So if a researcher, I don't know, I don't care, I'll just do whatever I have been doing. So in that sense,
How do I do it?
to use CCO.
Okay.
Or they just use, whatever.
So culture change. How do we actually get this adoption? All right. So join the group, please.
We're the practitioners. We just want to do whatever we're told to do.
Oh, I don't know. You influence quite a lot. So publishers, what we would like to do is give enough of a toolkit to when do you do this? So I do know that scientific data, that's the Nature publication for data papers and other wonderful digital things, they will actually put in 1,000 data sets, right? They'll do it in the reference section, no problem. And I have an example of that. And so they break the rule of no journal does this. So setting them aside, love them, yay. For AGU, it's about 40. If you hit 40 references that are digital objects, hot no. No, you go in the supplement. So what we'd like to do is say, dear publishers, and we can go to their meetings, stop doing that, please. Send these researchers over to this super cool Pangea tool, and all they have to do is pop these in, create their CCO. These are the adjustments in the paper, and you can actually give some copy editor instructions, because there may be copy editors are usually third-party providers for journals. And so we could write out some copy editor instructions so that we can get the paper laid out correctly. And so there's an intervention that would need to take place. Yeah.
So at the submitting manuscript stage, when a researcher submit their manuscript, and the journal publisher will get back to them, say, okay, your references list are gone outside the limit, we need you to do this and this and this.
That would be the intention, yes, that we would give a tool that would save the day. And you all have, I'm sure all of you have seen publisher emails that come back, and they are usually written in a very stern tone. They curate that, by the way, publishers curate that tone to make you do things. So please don't take it personally. I'm sorry, it's just, that's the culture of publishers. It's a very stern tone. But breathe, and we solve the problem by doing this. It's super easy, takes you about 30 seconds, and off you go. So we're hoping it is that simple. That's a culture change. Once we get this stood up, and the disciplines that need it will be the ones that will adopt it. So we do have use cases from multiple areas, definitely in the earth and space sciences, but also into health and bioinformatics. I know there's in the US, NIH has a use case, although those folks are really stressed out right now, so they're not really thinking about things like this. They're thinking more about keeping their jobs. But so yes, there will be a culture change.
We have a question online.
Oh, snap. Hello
Right.
online.
Okay, so this is from Stuart Chalk, is
Oh, Stuart.
The University of North Florida.
Yes, he is.
Will there be a CCO that links other CCOs?
Oh, okay.
If yes, will there be a metadata field that notes this?
All right, Stuart, I love you so much. All right, listen. So we went to talk to the Web of Science, Megan Forrest, who's the data person there, early on in the project to run this by her, and we had a really fantastic conversation. She did not promise that she would do this, right? So Megan, if you're listening, I'm honoring Shelley. I'm not promising, but let's think this through, which was great, right? Like she didn't hang up on me. And the requirements were, she gave the elements that are necessary for the Web of Science to recognize, in this case, a data citation, but we'll extend it for complex citation. But do not have a recursive situation. Do not put a CCO inside a CCO. So the generator is going to have an edit in there. You can't cite another CCO because it makes it hard on processing. So yes, Stuart, we saw that one really early on. It should be pretty easy. I can imagine the generator. Uwe, can you take some requirements down? So I can imagine the generator. You could actually say, I'd like to start with this existing CCO because now I've written 3 papers for my project. I did a CCO for the first paper, and I used all that data plus more. So the generator, you got that, Uwe? So the generator pulls it in, and then you add in 10 more data sets, drop 2 or whatever. So you should be able to do that. Additionally, another guidance could be, if you feel in your mind it is a burden, you want to reuse the complex citation you used for your first paper, but you've got 100 more samples, everything in the first complex citation is still good to go, I could imagine you citing complex citation 1 and complex citation 2, which is why that says it like a 1, that we wouldn't want you to have more than 1, but we would not stop you from having more than one. Poor John just had Shelley just got super complicated. So that would be what we would do. 5 minutes? Okay. Over to John. Time to roll up. So please do hop on to our interest group to follow along with the bouncing ball.
It just bothers me. I am sure there are very good reasons in her mind why you can't embed one complex citation in another. But if I go back to Knuth, I'm pretty sure that Knuth would say, conceptually, it's not at all clear why that should be a problem.
It's technically not hard. It's technically not hard.
Not hard.
But when the indexer, who's going to make sure that the credit actually happens, says, please don't do that, you're like, ooh, okay. I know.
It's an option to say you're going to make a lot of other lives much more complicated for the next 100 years. So how about if we think about that a little bit more and see if we can help you figure out a way.
Well, interestingly, we are still in the middle of conversations on what it means. So where?
That's right. We covered it.
Okay. We're not done. Exactly. We're not done. Okay. All right. Eric. What's in his pocket? Mints. Anybody want a mint?
Simple
Free
question.
Mints? Oh, okay.
What is the process for getting involved?
Oh, you are a member of RDA. You go over to the Complex Citation Implementation IG. You join, and you come to the Monday meetings.
What if you're not a member of RDA?
It's free.
Okay.
It's free, buddy. It's free. There's no reason you. And the membership is just so you're like registered on the website. That's what membership means. Plus, you come here, so you're kind of a member. You're here. Yeah, you did the thing.
Shall we take one last question?
Is that Stuart again?
Stuart, yeah. But how to acknowledge the work from the integrated CCO if it's from another person?
Wait, what? Say it again?
But how to acknowledge the work from the integrated complex citation object if it's from another person? That's the question.
Oh, okay. So Stuart creates a CCO. I take Stuart's CCO. I use it as input into my CCO. Stuart wants credit. Nobody. No, you don't get credit. It's an administrative list of things. It's like you gave me a Google Doc of a list of references. I'm not giving you attribution for that. That's just a list. Are you offended? I hope not.
I'll tell us in 30 seconds when it catches up.
All right, other side of the world. Is Stuart offended? Is Stuart offended? Yes? Is Stuart offended? Stuart's offended. Okay, we got one arm for Stuart being offended. Okay. The idea here is the CCO is not value add. You getting credit for me citing your CCO is not a thing.
And I think this is where there needs to be some conceptual dissociation between the effort that goes into curating a collection of objects that are expressed as a CCO, and then the CCO as just a systematic way of citing those objects without that. Because I think this is in my head. There are overlaps between a collection. You said it's not a collection.
It's not a collection.
And what a CCO is. And I think this is going to run into these sort of like conversations as this evolves. So it's going to be interesting.
In chemistry, is it more? Are you bothered because Stuart's bothered? Is it a thing in your space?
I'm thinking why someone might be bothered. I'm thinking someone might have gone to the effort of using software systems to create a collection of things that are essentially selections of other data objects that other people have created.
So there's effort.
And they've published that alongside their work and say, look at this subset that I created that proves this phenomenon X.
It's a research object.
Yeah, it's a research object in and of itself.
Okay. Let's add that into the discussion, because I'm following you that if we did in fact use somebody else's CCO as the base, we should have some sort of metadata that recognizes that. Yeah, okay. All right, Stuart, you just won that battle, buddy. Was there? Yep. And
just a point of clarification. So when you create a collection on DataCite, there's contributors, and I do understand that there is effort, a decent amount of effort in creating the collection or CCO. So wouldn't that be the place where you get the credit for the effort that goes into creating the list? And then pointing to the other base could go into the abstract or the metadata of that CCO. So I feel like that would be a simple. It might be too simple, but that's how I see it.
Well, please join us. We are in the midst of all these conversations, and having the voices that say, listen, it's a thing, frankly, are not well represented. So please join us, because we could really use that.
I think we just wrap up now, or at some point.
Is it time?
Yeah.
It's time to go? Okay, time. So great, hackathon coming up within November. As I've mentioned, join us on RDA, and RDA is free. We're building the guidelines, and we're defining the structure. Thank you.
And additional comments can be put into the collaborative notes. We will read them if there is something we haven't tackled. So thanks for coming.